For Module 14, we will cover the female reproductive system, as we have already talked about the male reproductive system in Module 13. In fact, another unique feature of the reproductive system is the anatomical and functional differences between males and females. The other organ systems do not display such differences between the sexes. Therefore, as we cover the female reproductive system, try to compare the similarities and the differences between the two sexes. So let's get started. The main structures of the female reproductive system are listed here. The female oocytes form in the ovaries, and these are going to be your gonads. They then leave the ovaries and are captured by these finger-like projections known as fimbriae, as they make their way into the uterine tubes, which can also be called fallopian tubes, where they will travel all the way to the uterus. In the uterine tubes is where fertilization usually occurs, meaning that this oocyte might meet a sperm and be fertilized by it to produce an offspring. The oocyte eventually reaches the uterus, which will be formed by three main layers: the perimetrium, the myometrium, and the endometrium. The cervix will be the last part of the uterus, where it opens into the vagina. The external opening of the vagina is going to be surrounded by an erectile tissue known as the bulb of the vestibule, and by the female external genitalia, which includes the clitoris, the labia minora, the labia majora, and the mons pubis. In addition, just like in males, females will also have a accessory gland that will secrete substances that help mainly during intercourse, and an example would be the greater vestibular gland. With regards to the main functions of the female reproductive system, we have that they will produce the oocyte in the ovaries, which we talked in the previous slide. They will protect and support the developing embryo and fetus, which is important, and they will also nourish the newborn infant after it's born. Let's get started with the ovaries, which are these small paired organs that are located near the lateral walls of the pelvic cavity. These are going to be homologous to the testes in males, and we can clearly see them on this flat image, one on each side. On this model that shows the pelvic cavity, we can clearly see the right ovary right over here, and the left ovary, we can see a little bit of it right over here. Notice that it is colored in yellow, and they will be the ones responsible for producing the oocytes and secreting the important hormones. Due to the fact that these structures stay suspended, they will each be stabilized by the ovarian ligament and the suspensory ligament. The ovarian ligaments, they extend from the lateral walls of the uterus near the attachment of the uterine tube. So here is the uterus. This would be the uterine tube. Therefore, this smaller one is the ovarian ligament. On the other model, it is a little bit easier to differentiate them as they are further apart. Here is the ovary, correct? Therefore, this is the ovarian ligament. The one that ends inside the uterus is the uterine tube. Also notice how the beginning of the uterine tube has these red projections that are called the fimbriae. Therefore, this will make it easier to differentiate the uterine tube from the ovarian ligament, even when they are really close to each other, because the uterine tube will always be associated with the fimbriae. Here is your fimbriae, continuous with it is the uterine tube. Therefore, this other one is the ovarian ligament. Same thing on the other side. Fimbriae is continuous with the uterine tube. Therefore, the other tube structure is the ovarian ligament. Now, the suspensory ligament extends from the lateral surface of the ovary past the open end of the uterine tube to the pelvic wall, where we can clearly see both of them on this model, one on each side. On this other model, we can't see the suspensory ligament. It might seem that this structure is it, but this is really the ureter coming down from the kidney and will go into the urinary bladder that sits below the uterus. The suspensory ligament will contain the major blood vessels of the ovary, the ovarian artery, and the ovarian vein, which we will see on this model. Here in blue are the ovarian veins, and in red we find the ovarian arteries. And these lines on this other model under the mesentery is representing these blood vessels as well. There are 3 intercalated processes that help to ensure the continuation of our species from the female perspective. These are the oogenesis, the ovarian cycle, and the uterine cycle. Oogenesis, like the name says, is going to be the production of the female gametes that are called the oocytes inside of the ovaries. With the ovarian cycle, this will be the monthly series of events that are going to be associated with the maturation of this oocyte. And last, the uterine cycle will involve a series of events that prepares the uterus for implantation of a fertilized oocyte. Now, oogenesis begins before birth and it accelerates at puberty, and it will end at menopause, which is the end of menstruation. And we will talk more about this as we go along. Now, at puberty, the rising levels of follicle-stimulating hormone will trigger the start of the ovarian cycle, which, after it is initiated during puberty, it will occur each month thereafter until menopause. Now, let's talk about the oogenesis within the ovarian cycle. So it's going to be divided into 7 different steps. First, we have what we call the primordial ovarian follicles. And the primary oocyte and its follicle cells form what we call this structure that's called the primordial ovarian follicle. Now, the ovarian cycle begins as this activated primordial ovarian follicle develops into what we call the primary ovarian follicle. These follicular cells, they will undergo repeated cell divisions, and as a result, several layers of follicular cells develop around the oocyte, as we can see from these 2 follicles over here. Notice how there are more cell layers around the oocyte on this follicle than on this one. These follicle cells are called granulosa cells, and the enlarging oocyte secretes proteins that form an extracellular coat that's called the zona pellucida around the oocyte, as we can see from this image. The granulosa cells will continually provide the developing oocyte with nutrients, which will be important for their development. Now, many of these primordial follicles will develop into primary follicles, but only a few of the primary follicles mature further. And this process is apparently under the control of a growth factor produced by the oocyte. The transformation begins as the wall of the follicle thickens, and at this stage, the complex is going to be known as the secondary ovarian follicle. The primary oocyte inside the secondary ovarian follicle continues to grow slowly, as we can see from these images. This will lead us into the formation of the tertiary ovarian follicle, which will occur in the next 2 to 3 days, where the follicle wall continues to grow, and the deeper follicular cells, they begin secreting follicular fluid. And this fluid accumulates in small pockets that gradually expand between the inner and outer cell layers of the follicle. The secondary follicle as a whole has doubled in size and is now called the tertiary follicle. This tertiary follicle can also be called a mature or a Graafian follicle, which will continue to grow and accumulate the follicular fluid. And its large size will create a prominent bulge in the surface of the ovary. Now, the granulosa cells that are still associated with the primary oocyte will form this protective layer that's known as the corona radiata. And as the granulosa cells enlarge and multiply, then adjacent cells form a layer of thecal endocrine cells around the entire follicle, which we cannot see on this image. But these thecal endocrine cells and the granulosa cells work together to produce the sex hormones that are called estrogen. And this will lead us to the next step, which is ovulation. Remember that the follicle is growing by not only adding dividing cells, but also follicular fluid. Therefore, it gets to a point where the pressure inside the follicle is too high and the distended follicular wall will rupture, releasing the follicular contents, including the oocyte, into the pelvic cavity. And the sticky follicular fluid keeps the corona radiata attached to the surface of the ovary near the rupture wall of the follicle. Therefore, the oocyte is then moved into the uterine tube by contact with the fimbriae that extends from these uterine tubes, or also by fluid currents that are produced by the cilia that line the tube. And usually only a single oocyte is released into the pelvic cavity at ovulation, although many primordial follicles may have developed into a primary follicle, and several primary follicles may have been converted to a secondary follicle. Now, these follicles that are not released into the pelvic cavity, they will undergo follicular atresia, also known as degeneration. So they will disappear. So with the exit of the secondary oocyte being released, this means that the tertiary follicle is empty, therefore it will start to collapse since the contents have already come out. And in this process, sometimes there are small blood vessels that also rupture and they bleed. And this is why some women, sometimes they do have a small amount of bleeding right after ovulation. But this bleeding is not considered to be menses, which is menstruation. Under the stimulation of luteinizing hormone, the remaining granulosa cells then invade the area and they will proliferate to create what we call the corpus luteum. So the luteinizing hormone is what will give rise to the corpus luteum. And within 12 days after ovulation, the corpus luteum will begin to degenerate if there's no fertilization that takes place by invasion of fibroblasts, and it will become a non-functional corpus luteum, producing this knot of pale scar tissue that's called the corpus albicans. The hormone estradiol is the most important estrogen, and it is going to be the dominant hormone prior to ovulation. Estrogen has several important functions, including the stimulation of bone and muscle growth, the maintenance of the female secondary sex characteristics. It will also affect the central nervous system activity, including the sex-related behaviors and drives. It will maintain the function of the reproductive glands and organs. And lastly, it will initiate the repair and the growth of the uterine lining during the uterine cycle. To summarize, we can take a look at the top half of this graph where we can see the follicular development, which is actually called the follicular phase. Therefore, we already know that within the ovaries are the ovarian follicles. Each ovarian follicle consists of an oocyte and a variable number of surrounding cells that will nourish the developing oocyte and secrete hormones as the follicle grows larger. The ovarian follicle initially begins as a primordial follicle. Therefore, these two would be considered those which sequentially develops into the primary follicle, then the secondary follicle, and the mature Graafian follicle. Ovulation occurs when the mature follicle ruptures or the tertiary follicle ruptures, releasing the oocyte into the pelvic cavity. From the pelvic cavity, the oocyte will enter the uterine tube, and within the ovary, the remnants of the ruptured follicle developed into a structure that's called the corpus luteum, where luteum means yellow and corpus means body, so the yellow body, which will initiate what we call the luteal phase. Now, the corpus luteum eventually degenerates into fibrous scar tissue called the corpus albicans, and albicans means white, so a white body. Finally, the disintegration of the corpus luteum will mark the end of the ovarian cycle, and a new ovarian cycle then begins with the activation of another group of primordial follicles. In fact, another ovarian cycle begins immediately. And why is this? Well, let's take a look now at what happens to the hormones that are released during these different phases. First, we can start by saying that at the end of the ovarian cycle, notice how there is a drastic decline in progesterone and estrogen levels. Those are represented by the red and blue lines, red for estrogen and blue for progesterone. And this decline will stimulate gonadotropin-releasing hormone production at the hypothalamus. This hormone triggers, in return, a rise in follicle-stimulating hormone, represented by the green line, and luteinizing hormone, that's represented here by the yellow line productions by the anterior lobe of the pituitary gland, and this rise stimulates another period of the follicle development. Notice how as follicle-stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone increase gradually, this matures the follicle, and right after the peak of these both hormones, that is when ovulation occurs. The hormonal changes involved with the ovarian cycle will affect the activities of other reproductive tissues and organs. So, for example, in the uterus, the hormonal changes are responsible for the maintenance of the uterine cycle, which we will discuss soon.